Money FM 89.3, the best of the afternoon update.
It's Lynlee with you, and you're listening to Industry Insight. Now, Southeast Asia's construction sector is feeling the heat, and not just from the weather. Everyone wants more data centers to power the digital economy, more advanced factories to keep supply chains close to home, and greener, high-performance buildings to meet tough new sustainability rules. The demand is huge, and it's growing fast. But with costs climbing, skilled workers in short supply, as well as stricter regulations kicking in, the big question now is, can Singapore and the region keep up? According to professional services company Townsend's latest Global Construction Market Intelligence 2025 report, the region has shown impressive resilience so far. But risks are growing, and staying competitive will require smarter strategies, collaboration, and a future-ready workforce. Joining me now to unpack the findings and what they mean for investors, developers, and the economy is Khoo Boon, Managing Director at Townsend Singapore. Boon leads the firm's work across real estate, infrastructure, and energy in the region, and he's been instrumental in driving collaborative contracting and sustainability initiatives here in Singapore. Welcome to the show, Boon.
Hi, good afternoon, Lily. Thanks for having me.
Okay, let's kick off with the big picture, Boon. Your GCMI report paints a pretty optimistic view of Southeast Asia's construction market, despite all the global uncertainties we keep hearing about. What's driving that resilience?
I think in Southeast Asia, as I see the overall global trend as well in Southeast Asia, data center and high-tech has emerged as a top-performing sector. And that's also driving a lot of activities around the region. And of course, the infrastructure around the region as well, driving the construction demand. Yeah.
Okay. So do you think that developers are perhaps recalibrating?
I guess certainly looking at the demand, especially let's say in Singapore context itself, whereby the demand is much higher compared to previous years. Developers when they are looking at projects, of course they are recalibrating. Having a better sensing on the market is so important, and having us supporting them from procurement strategy perspective itself is pretty important. Timing their projects, understanding the demand in the market, and when is the best time to look at their procurement and tendering is quite key.
Okay. Yeah, because you would think that it would be happening very quickly as well, because higher costs alone would slow things down. And speaking of costs, Singapore is still the region's most expensive construction market by quite a margin. Yet you're seeing contracts at record highs. What's keeping investors coming back here to Singapore?
I think your observation is right, that there's also a pickup that Singapore remains probably the highest within Southeast Asia, and it's still on a high side. I think the key drivers that probably drive investor and developer in Singapore, I believe Singapore is stable and secured. And of course, from the government policy standpoint, it's very predictable, and it's also a very business-friendly environment, and the processes are very transparent. And of course, while there are volatility, I believe it's lesser compared to other neighboring markets itself. Yeah, that certainly add a plus point for us in Singapore.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, it's a good point. When the stakes are high, you're paying for peace of mind as much as anything else, I think. So one big trend your report highlights is the boom in data centers and advanced manufacturing across this region. Why are those sectors so hot right now, and how is that changing the way projects are being delivered?
All right, so the key drivers, I think, is also for data center and high-tech. So data center is driven by the high demand for digital infrastructure, which is driving across the data center boom across Asia. As you know, cloud services, AI computing, streaming, digitalization, these are key drivers itself. Then in terms of advanced manufacturing and manufacturing sector itself, of course, that was also driven by the trade tensions and also COVID legacy itself, whereby it drives manufacturer look at diversifying the location itself. Yeah, just like for data center itself, nearshoring was also a strategy whereby you see a lot more data center development in places like Malaysia, Indonesia, to accelerate part of the risk reduction itself. Yeah.
Okay, and these projects are also more technically demanding, I would think.
Yeah, certainly. So data center, I think, require very highly specialized contractors as well as equipment itself. while I guess across the different sector, it may drive a higher profit margin globally. That's our findings. But I think the specialty skill set of the contractors are pretty important. And then the other aspect, because it's very highly driven by the mechanical and specialized equipments, and all these equipments require long lead time, up to as long as a year to more than a year, or even like as long as 40 weeks when the demand is up. So I think in terms of planning for data center projects, it's very important to also look at the procurement strategy, looking at also things like long lead procurement strategy to look at procuring this early. And of course, I think with all this, it's also driven not only on data center, I think with the demand in the sector itself, I think there are a lot more needs to look at how do we manage the project collaboratively. That's why I think collaborative contracting is something that is actually close at heart at this moment. Yeah.
So not just more demand, but more complex demand.
Yep.
On that note, your report flags labour shortages, especially skilled MEP and green-collar workers, as one of the region's biggest challenges. How bad is it? And what's actually being done to fix it?
I think from local context, the skilled labour are generally, we are relying a lot on migrant workers. Yeah, of course, I think there has been increase in the number of workers, but having the skilled workers that are able to deal with this, that remains a challenge. Now, apart from skilled labour, in such kind of project, you also require skilled PMET in the local context. Yeah, so the PMETs that is able to handle such complex projects and able to manage and plan it. So I think in terms of some of the things that I think the local authority have done is also looking at upskilling some of local, not so much on the labour, but more on the PMET itself. There are a lot more programs that enable mid-career programs, as well as there are also some other programs that is for the existing professional wanting to enhance their own knowledge to switch into some of these newer technology kind of careers. Yeah.
But across the board, and we're talking about globally, since this is a global report, I understand that there's over 90% of the markets have reported shortages. Is that right?
Yeah, generally that is the trend that we have been seeing. Of course, in some of the country whereby the skilled labour comes mainly from their home country, we do see that there are some efforts and initiatives about really upskilling the local workforce in order to overcome some of these challenges. Yeah.
Okay. Moving on to sustainability. Now, you've got stricter waste regulations, embodied carbon targets. How much are these really changing the way projects are being planned and budgeted?
I think, of course, nowadays, I think people are more aware of the impact on lower carbon and also sustainability. And sustainability has become quite a norm in Singapore now, having placed for many years now. Of course, in recent years, I think people are talking about looking at projects, how do we drive a lower carbon? These thinking are really upfront during the design stage. So as early as when you're doing the planning stage, and some of the consideration around material selections and so on and so forth are being considered upfront. So as compared to in the past, some of these things are thought late in the process itself. So certainly it does impact some of the decisions making, especially clients that is very high in our priority in terms of ESG and in terms of sustainability.
So Boon, you mentioned collaborative contracting earlier, which is something you're quite familiar with. It's one way to improve certainty and reduce risk. Can you explain further what makes it different and why it's gaining traction?
So collaborative contracting, I look at it from, it's actually a way how the contract is being structured, both in the contract form itself, as well as how the parties come together to manage the project. So the key thing that's underpinning the entire collaborative contracting, having a common and aligned goal between the parties, especially the developers, the contractors, the consultant, and the key parties that's working around, while each of us may have our own commercial goals. So common goals is very important, and then building the trust between the parties is very important. And that next, I think, is about having an equitable risk-sharing mechanism, which is something very important. I think our lesson learned from COVID days, whereby nobody is spared from the challenge we face in COVID. Then building a way to manage the risk is really important. Of course, ultimately, by having that, then allows dispute avoidance. So any of these potential disputes are being flushed out early. There are mechanisms such as early warning that allow parties to raise issues, so that at least any of the things can be discussed. Let's say if there's any disruptions in the supply chain or there's any issues around, parties are able to raise it up and discuss solution. And then last but not least, I think quite importantly is really a apart from the contract mechanism, it's also a behavior and mindset change that people want to work together for a common goal of the projects. Yeah.
Help me understand this. How does it work? I gather that it's bringing all parties, clients, contractors, consultants together early, got aligned incentives as well. But who manages the contract? Is it one contract or many, many different contracts?
So generally, the main part of the contract, of course, is between the owner or the developers and the contractors. That's the main one that is driving the whole construction contract. So mechanism can be built within this itself. And of course, and where possible, where some of the key subcontractors, you could also build in some of this mechanism. Because I think apart from the main contractors that is delivering the project, there's also needs of the partnering from the rest of the key subcontractors. So one of the ingredients for collaborative contracting also, we believe in having partnering workshops when the job starts and at different point in time, whereby people are bringing together through a kind of team building, aligning of objectives. So key subcontractors are also involved in some of these workshops. So apart from the technical requirements, it's about aligning some of these key goals, key targets, and some way of even communicating, managing conflicts, whereby people are being brought to platform to understand each other better. And the other aspect, apart from the contract itself, of course, there are things that we could also build into a consultant contract. Yeah.
Okay. So is this the industry standard now, or is it a growing trend?
I think I would say it's a growing trend, and Building Construction Authority have been driving collaborative contracting for some time. And it's not new to Townsend. We have been doing a lot of this in UK, Australia, and elsewhere, and also even Hong Kong. So we have been actually supporting this early 2020. And of course, that's gaining traction because there is already many pilot projects that is on the public sector. And in the private sector, there are also quite a number of the projects starting to adopt this. And with the current situation, that certainly provides a good platform for people to look at that more positively. Yeah.
Makes perfect sense, I think, especially in a climate where no one can afford surprises halfway through a project. Now, we've also been hearing a lot about supply chain disruptions and nearshoring. I think you mentioned that as well. How can developers adapt their procurement strategies to deal with that?
I think you can see that currently, because of that demand, right, while we're helping developers and clients to procure our projects, in the supply chain, because of that demand, the contractors are also very selective on the projects that they are going for. Yeah, so quite importantly is also when we work with the developer is to understand the market, looking at where's the best time the project should be launched in the sense of tendering, and even the way a project is being procured. In the past, probably it's just an open tender whereby, let's say for private projects, whereby you may invite the open market to tender, but in the current situation, that may not be the best approach. So many of our clients may be looking at more selective tender, having a tighter pre-qualifications of the qualified contractors, and then inviting them in to tender. And then, of course, working very closely with them, even some of them more complex projects through early contractors' involvement, keeping them informed of the projects, so that at least they're warm up and also be committed to come in to actually participate in the tender. Yeah.
So resilience really is being built into the supply chain from the start.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah.
Finally, Boon, with all this in mind, what's your best advice for clients and investors who want to future-proof their construction projects in Southeast Asia?
I think it's really looking at their projects and understanding the market, and of course, building, I think it goes back to building that partnership with the cluster partner they can work with, whether it's being consultant or contractors or even key subcontractors. Quite important, I think, is about having the alliance, the understanding, and also in longer term from the collaborative contracting lens, it's about really building that trust. And then as you build on one project to subsequent projects and pipelines of projects, then you kind of build a different ecosystem that you can actually be more resilient. It's where the ecosystem is being strengthened. That's where I think the resilience can be built for a longer term.
So trust, collaboration, resilience, all towards long-term value.
Yep, certainly.
That's a great takeaway, thinking ahead and thinking holistically as well. Thank you so much, Boon. Really insightful conversation. It's clear this region has a lot of opportunity ahead, but also some big challenges to navigate. He is Khoo Boon, Managing Director at Turner & Townsend, Singapore. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.